Hi, I'm Sheriff Michelle Cook.
And I'm Superintendent of Schools, David Broskie.
And we are here today to talk to all of you about how we investigate the tips that come in. You know, we receive tips all the time. And in regards to schools, tips can come in many ways. They come in through social media. They can come in through a student notifying an SRO verbally, a written note. I mean, we've even seen them where somebody takes a marker and writes in a bathroom. And I want to assure all of you that any sort of tip, no matter what format they come in, is investigated thoroughly, absolutely thoroughly. So what does that investigation look like? Well, the first thing that we do is we look to find the person that provided the information. If a student comes and tells us, then we have that student. But if it's something that's written down, we try to find the person who originally shared that information. Then we tried to find the person who made the original statement, who said those original words or wrote down those original words. And I want to say something here to all of you. If you find something that is shared or see something that is shared, the more you share it with others, the harder it is for us to trace the original person. So now we have a statement that's been made, a tip that's been submitted, where we found the source. The next thing that we do from a criminal perspective is we look for context. In what context was this statement made? And I'll give you an example. Football player has a big game tonight, they're excited, and a friend says, hey, do you think you're going to beat the other team? And he says, I think we're going to kill them. Somebody walks by, hears that, turns that student in. That's a statement that was made out of not a malicious context. So after we find the source, we identify the person, we look for the context in which the statement was made. After we confirm context, we then also look for intent. What was the intent of this statement? Was this intent to cause harm, to threaten, to commit a crime, or even to disrupt a school function? So we've now got the source, we're looking at the context, and then next we're looking at the intent. Now, how we get through all of that is through extensive interviews. You know, we interview parents, we interview students, we interview witnesses, we'll interview teachers, and we also conduct searches. We will search the student's backpack, their cell phone, or any electronic device they have. If they drive, we search their car. And we'll even go to a student's house and ask for permission to search the student's room. So lots of extensive work that's going on the criminal side. And on the criminal side, it is the Clay County Sheriff's Office that's taking the lead on that. And we have seasoned investigators that are involved in that process. Now, simultaneously, while all that criminal investigation is going on, there's a school investigation, and Superintendent Broskie is going to talk about that.
Yes, ma'am. The school thoroughly investigates all tips or threats that are sent to the school system. We have what's called a threat assessment team. That team consists of really at least 4 individuals. One is an administrator of the school, the other is the school resource officer, a guidance counselor, and a teacher or adult that knows that student personally. This team then institutes what's called a threat assessment. The threat assessment is based off of what's called the Florida model. This is a scientific, research-based way that we investigate these tips that are brought into the school system. Each member of the team, the 4 members that I mentioned previously, are all trained extensively on this. So when a tip comes in, it's not people just kind of looking at it and kind of willy-nilly looking at a tip. It's a scientific, research-based, it's done the same way every time. Mm-hmm. Whatever the tip is that's brought in, we follow the same exact process each and every time. As soon as that tip comes in, we're notifying law enforcement in case they haven't been notified. We're starting our own investigation along the way. At that point, once we kind of have an idea of what's happening, we're also sending a robocall out to parents, informing parents. I think parents, what I would say to you is that some of the information related to students' educational records is protected under federal law. So a lot of times parents want to know, well, what happened with the student? Who was the student? What exactly did the student do? Because that's part of the student record, we cannot give you that information by statute. That's not my rule. That's the statute that actually says that. So simultaneously, the sheriff's office is doing their investigation. we're doing our investigation. For communication purposes, we try to put that robocall out as soon as we know what's happening, what the nature of the threat is to the school. Then you'll also notice, parents, that you get the follow-up call telling you what's happened with that. So that's kind of the school process. Sure.
Great. So again, I want to emphasize that we receive a lot of tips. In fact, we're up to 50 or so already. As a comparison, there's an adjoining county that's had over 300 so far this school year. Every single tip that comes in is thoroughly investigated to determine if there's an actual threat. And as the superintendent said, out of an abundance of caution, when we have a very active investigation going on, the parents are notified. Now, it's important to realize that not every tip leads to criminal charges. Some tips are unfounded. Let's go back to the statement of the that the football player made. That's an unfounded tip. There's no threat there. And at the other end of the spectrum are tips where there's an arrest. And in between, there's a whole lot of activity or discipline that can take place at the school level, if you want to talk about that.
Yes, ma'am. You know, the burden of proof for the sheriff versus the school is much different. You know, the sheriff has a much stronger burden of proof than the school system does. If you disrupt a Clay County school, you are receiving disciplinary consequence. That's a fact. The level of consequence depends on the action that was taken by the student. So each one of those is on a case-by-case basis. But the preponderance of the evidence simply means, is it more likely that it happened than it didn't happen? And even if you didn't intend to disrupt the school, and you did disrupt the school, you are going to receive consequences that are outlined within our Code of Student Conduct. For example, students that unwittingly put a message out there that causes students a disruption, such as students no longer attending school because they're out of fear, they don't come to school, that's a disruption, and that will be dealt with a zero tolerance from the school system. Much different than criminal charges brought by the sheriff.
Now, let me say this as we wrap up this video. We have zero tolerance for threats. We have zero tolerance for any threat of violence, any threat of intimidation, any disruption of any school function. And it is very important, parents, that you talk to your students about the consequences that are going to happen, even if jokingly they carry on or forward or state a threat or anything like that. On the other side, talk to your students. If they overhear something that's concerning, submit that tip. They can submit it through Fortify Florida or let an adult at the school know. Again, we want to thank you for listening to this video, and we ask that you please, talk with your students and talk with your family. And if you have any questions about how tips are investigated, you can reach out to us at sheriff@claysheriff.com.
Or David Broskie at My One Clay, or just simply go onto the district website, click on Superintendent, and I'm right there.
Thank you very much.